All right, U.S. History at Homers. Um, Want to go over what we're doing today. I didn't record the class. Again, I will do that if it's very significant, like I'm teaching the whole time. I'll do that, or I'll just record the spots that you need that. Otherwise, I'll come on here and try to do some of this. So here's what we did today. We started, and the class needed about 10 more minutes to finish their examining passenger lists assignment. So you guys are doing that on your own, and you're emailing that to me. So make sure you get that done. Well, today's Thursday, so you're going to watch this tomorrow. So make sure you get that to me by Friday, 3:30 p.m. Email it to me so I can see that you did it. I'll be grading that for completion. Okay, so don't worry if you got some of the. It's hard to count some of those numbers and who's married and who isn't. That's part of being a historian on this. So this activity is really to show you what historians do, how they're trying to find out about the common people here on this, and interpret data. So they have data that they have to interpret and record, and there's no definitive answer. Okay, how many are married on there? Doesn't necessarily say, because you have to kind of go by last names. Even men and women, you can pretty much tell from names, but not all of them. So don't worry about right or wrong. Just make sure you get it to me. You have that chart filled out, and you have the 2 questions answered. So that's what we did today, and we discussed that. And so after I get those from you, I'll probably come on and just talk a little bit about that. But the activity itself is designed to have you see what historians do, and specifically what they need to do to find out about the common person. We often have diaries, letters, accounts written about famous people throughout history, but what about the average person in this case that came from England to the colonies? So as you do it and you look at those questions, it's ask you to kind of infer from the data. The questions are like, okay, what's the difference between Virginia and New England? So specifically think about, when you look at those ratios, the one spot has more men going to it. The ratio is more men than women, more young adults than young people, families, older people, and I won't tell you which one, but you should be able to tell that. And so what can you infer about the settlement in Virginia if you got a bunch of young men coming to it and not many women? And then in the other spot, I just gave it away. Whatever, I like you guys. You still have to fill out the chart. The other spot, New England, you've got more families going there. So what's that tell you about those areas? Okay, so go ahead and do that. Email that to me, and that's basically what we did for half a class today. And then we did a Kahoot on our timeline. So I'm looking at, before I had Kahoot where I could like assign it and have you guys do it. So I think I'll try and get that set up between Kahoot or Quizlet so that you guys can be playing some of the games that we play here at home. A good way to practice timeline, memory verse, things like that. So be looking for that, but I don't have that yet. So we took about 10 minutes to do a Kahoot. Feel free to study your timeline, but not overly significant because you don't have a quiz on it tomorrow. You just have to write it out 3 times and get it to me by Monday. The final thing we did is I started a lecture, and different classes are getting different lengths into it, but not very far. So I'm going to finish this video just by kind of introducing the lecture, how far I got in most of the classes, and then next week I will have a full lecture for you that I'll share with you. So if you look at our study guide on our Moodle page, so you want to see our study guide, it is Unit 1A study guide. It will show you that for the upcoming test you have a handout reading, which I'll post on Moodle. You have critical thinking and short answer questions, and I think I have 6 bullet points there, and that's basically coming from this lecture that I'm going to give you, just introduce here and then give you next week, and then you've got your timeline. So our unit test that'll be happening next week, it's scheduled for Wednesday for you guys, will cover that. So that's each one, every unit test will give you a study guide like that. So let me just introduce the lecture. Literally in 2 out of 3 classes I only lectured for 5 minutes. So it'll probably be even a little bit less here, but just to kind of give you an introduction to it. So we're going to be talking about the Great Awakening, and the Great Awakening in America occurred between the 1730s and 1740s. So in that time frame, if you are learning your timeline, you'd recognize, oh, this is before we became a country. That's before the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, this revival happened while we were still colonies, 13 colonies. So it's a great awakening. It's a revival because it touched so many areas. It's going to go through every colony. It's going to go into England, into Europe. We're going to see basically this massive revival of the church in basically kind of a heartfelt movement of worship of God, love of God, conversion to become to Christianity. So that's why it's called the Great Awakening. I love to teach it. I think it's very fascinating. So first point, big letter A. And what I tell my students is you can take notes. You can take pictures of the PowerPoint, which when I do this kind of officially, I'll have the PowerPoint there for you, and I'll be teaching kind of in a box so you can see the PowerPoint. So you'll have a video of it. But you can approach it how you want. But you want to keep that study guide handy so you see exactly what you need to know. So I start off with the big letter A, and again, you'll see the PowerPoint next week, and it's called Divided Protestantism. This is as far as I got in class today to talk about Protestantism. That was hard for me to say, Protestantism. In the class, I asked, okay, how many guys are Protestants? And very few people raised their hand. And the irony is, most of us are Protestants. When it comes to Christianity, there's basically three major branches. There's other branches outside of that, but there is Eastern Orthodox Christianity, Roman Catholicism, and then Protestantism. And Protestantism comes about after Martin Luther writes his 95 Theses in 1517. It starts a movement within the church that is protesting the Roman Catholic Church. And so they become known as Protestants. So if you're not Roman Catholic, you're not Eastern Orthodox, but you are a Christian, you're most likely Protestant. So under Protestantism are lots of denominations like Baptists, Methodists, Lutherans, Reformed churches, non-denominational churches. They all kind of fall under that. So most of our student body is Protestant. Whether you knew it or not, you are protesting, and that's what you're called. So divided Protestantism is how I start this lecture, because after Martin Luther protests the Roman Catholic Church, there'll be many churches formed that have different theologies. And so the Roman Catholic Church is united under the Pope. Protestantism will have all these different denominations. And for at least 200 years, they are very divided. They each think they're right and the other ones are wrong, and they're pretty set in their ways and think they're the ones who have the truth of God and others do not. So what the Great Awakening does that's very unique is it breaks down some of those divisions. So in the New World, we'll have Puritans, and we'll have Pilgrims, and we'll have Anglicans, and we'll have Quakers, and we'll have Mennonites, and we'll have Baptists, and all these different groups. And again, most of them thinking they're right and the others are wrong. But when this revival comes in and sweeps through the colonies, suddenly it becomes very apparent that if you think you're right and you're experiencing God in this amazing way, then you look down the street at the other church that you didn't think was right, and they too are experiencing God in an amazing way. Suddenly it brings some unity. And it's a really cool move from God to kind of bring unity to the Protestant movement, to the effect where, they'll trade pulpits, like Baptists will preach with Anglicans, and we'll see this where some pastors who before would be divided are now like, hey, God's moving in my church, he's moving in your church, let's get together and have an open air meeting so we can worship God together and we can have sermons together. And so it's a really cool kind of start. It's really the first time in our history, the colonial history, where we have something happen in all the colonies and people embrace it in all the colonies. So that's basically how I start the lecture, what I gave them, and that's where I'll stop with you. So it's just a nice little 10-minute video for you, kind of talking about what we did. So remember, email me by tomorrow, Friday. So I'll just say Friday because maybe you're watching this on Friday. Friday by 3:30, get me that examining pastor list video, and then by Monday you need to write out those timelines, and come Monday I'll have a nice video for you kind of going through the entire lecture. Okay? It was good seeing you guys in the Zoom on Wednesday, getting to see your faces. It's kind of nicer seeing your faces because you don't wear masks, so but good to see you guys, and we'll keep chatting. All right, see ya.